Hello everyone and welcome back to TPS 4x4 version 563 training. I'm Lewis Weber for Behavior Care. During this segment we are going to take a look at the AB graph right here. But before we do, I'm going to go over to data entry, because in order for data to be sent to the AB graph we must click on the graph icon. And you see for RB, student is RB, we have to click on the graph icon here, and if we go to the left, the next student, they all have the same graph icon. So JB would, if you wanted to see JB's data graphed for all of these graphs except for the W sum and also the P3, which we have not talked about yet, but the W sum, the weekly summary, that graph is always live, as is the P3. But all the other graphs, including AB, you must click on the graph icon. Now what we're going to do is we're going to click on RB's data, take a look at for this segment. So here we go. You ready? Click. Now it's graphed. It's that fast. So all of RB's data are sent to all of these graphs in white, and also to AB, which is what we're going to take a look at right now. So let's do that. And there it is. RB's data. Rating scale 0 is 0, 1, 2, and 3. Now, the reason why there is a 0 here is not because you've entered it, but because in some cases, if no data have been entered because the values are 0, such as like right here, if there were never any data entered, it has to be represented on this graph and in this table, and so there would be a 0 showing up here as well. So even though we're not entering blanks, they do count as zeros, and for certain kinds of displays they will be displayed as zeros. So it's just a convenience to not have to enter all those zeros in, but we are going to use them as zeros and display them as zeros depending on the graph. You'll note at top we've got the two blue rectangles, which is a convention in TPS. The blue rectangles are where you will enter dates for a variety of reasons. In this case, it's so you can have a start date and a stop date for showing your data for RB. Now, if you put the first and last day of the school year, which is actually the 18th, is it not? And so if you put the 18th through the 29th of May, it will only select the data that are there. So when you leave, if you were to leave these dates, it would always be whatever data RB had for the school year. It just ignores the days there are no data. But sometimes you want to be able to look at data for a smaller part of the school year where you have collected data, like maybe for the first month or during the period of time before a significant change in the intervention. And so you could put another day right here that would be the ending time for your analysis. And it's very convenient to print that out, and then what you would do is put the next day here and let this be the end of the school year, so that way any subsequent data would be displayed from that date on, and you would have the printed version of these graphs as a baseline to compare from. Okay, that was probably a little more complicated than needed to be, but let's move on and see what we've got here. So we'll leave this for the whole year, so it's just going to take all the data that RB has to offer. We have, I'm going to make this smaller just to show you the layout. We have, okay, is that small enough? We have 4 graphs that are going to be shown using the same style. And that style is a tabular style with the graphic 3D presentation, which I really do like because it's so colorful and pretty. And I'm trying to balance it there. Let's make it just a little bit smaller. Too small to read clearly, but these are the increasing behaviors right here, and these are the decreasing behaviors, and here are the academic blocks. And of course the count is what will be shown in this graph. And we're not using all of the increasing behaviors, so these just stay as 0 points. And we're not using the 4th decreasing behavior either, so that gets shown as 0. Now you'll note that this graph tells a lot, but sometimes the bars do conceal each other, which is why the data are displayed in a tabular format. You'll also note that I've used this checkerboard pattern for the decreasing side and a solid fill for the increasing side, so that when you do print it in black and white, it does show graphically that there are different kinds of shading that's being used, so you know the difference between the increasing and the decreasing. So what does this graph show? This first graph shows the number of academic blocks in which the target behavior occurred. Not the ratings, not the totals of the ratings. What TPS does here is it looks at whether or not the behavior occurred in an academic block. So it just considers yes or no. It uses a binary analysis. Did the behavior occur? Did it not occur? And then it counts how many academic blocks the behavior occurred. So we know that that this student had appropriate social interaction with staff in 72 of the recorded days for this time period. 72 of the days had the student had appropriate social interaction with staff, and 64 of them there were appropriate transitions, non-zero values. For this kind of graph, we tend to focus on the decreasing side because we know that there are going to be numerous opportunities for increasing behaviors. What we do want to see is how many decreasing behaviors occurred during that time frame. So this particular graph, we tend to focus on the right side. And so let's focus on that. 43 academic blocks had physical aggression to self, and 38 had physical aggression to others, and 51 of those blocks had verbal aggression. Now, even though this graph doesn't tell you how many days there were, you could see that 72 of them had appropriate social interaction with staff, and 51 of them also had verbal aggression. So there's a lot of verbal aggression going on here. A total for the time period, which we'll learn from another report. We'll find that out actually if we were to look at the D1 report. It says 80 days worth of data, but I don't want to spend time on that. So 80 days worth of data, there were 230 academic blocks in which physical aggression to self occurred, and 224 for aggression to others, and 293 for verbal aggression. So this gives us a pretty good picture of what's going on with regard to these decreasing behaviors. And we can also see that they're pretty consistent throughout the day. Active board tends to be the least, and playground as well. Not too much physical aggression to self in the active board session and the playground. Well, that's good to know. Significant problems in the morning. The next graph takes a look at percentages of increasing and decreasing target behaviors. I'll bring that up in just a second here. Okay. Percentages mean percent of possible points. There's 100% possible points because it is percent. Okay, so it's percentage of increasing and decreasing target behaviors, and I'm going to make that a little bit bigger again, okay, because I really would like to show it so that you can read it. Percent of 100% possible, percent of 100% possible, because percent is always 100% as the maximum. So 62% of points were earned during arrival for appropriate social interaction with staff. 62% of the available points, and 60% of available points for transitions. And we can look around here and we see that pretty good percentages were earned, not so much in special activity, and personal hygiene, not so good. Should have been 100. What'd she do? She earned 11% of the possible points, 57% as an average of this column, 66% for transitions. We would like to see 100%. What about for decreasing target behaviors? We'd like to see 0%, but she earned 22% of the available points. That means 1s and some 2s and some 3s were collected during each of those academic blocks for physical aggression to self. Now this display doesn't tell you what that distribution is. Other displays do. In fact, the D1 does, and we'll go over that another time. But for right now, what we're looking at is a picture of success or lack thereof. How did the student do in terms of their increasing targets and in terms of their decreasing targets, and how do these percentages vary based on academic block? So it tells us a lot about what's going on. 32% of the points were earned for physical aggression to self, 28% for aggression to others. We'd like for that to have been 0 or low, like 1%, and 2% for personal hygiene. Okay, and the corresponding graph maximizing at 100%. The next one shows the average rating of increasing and decreasing target behaviors. Now that's the average for all of the measures, all of the academic blocks that occurred. Let's try that again. It's the average of every day in which RB participated in some kind of arrival or morning work. So all of the values that were entered under physical aggression for arrival and morning work are averaged, including the blanks. And the blanks are computed as zeros. So the averages here, the averages are significantly biased by academic blocks in which the target behavior did not occur, which is something that we want. We want the student to have a low percentage because a lot of those academic blocks had were blank or were computed as zeros. We want these to be zeros. We want these to be low. We want this to be high. How high? Well, 3 is the maximum, right? Because 3 is the maximum rating that you could give. We would like for her to have earned a 3 in all of these. And you can see in active board, the average rating for active board for appropriate social behavior with staff was 2.15 out of a possible 3. Now, you might be thinking, well, it doesn't really tell us how intense it was because of all those blanks. Well, every analysis is a compromise, and we have to take it for what it's worth. This analysis, which is an average of all of the ratings, is just that, an average of all of the ratings. We want that to be low, we want that to be high. If we want to start to think about what the intensity was without those blanks, averaging in and depressing the values, then we go to the next graph. And you knew I was going to do that, didn't you? Average rating of increasing and decreasing target behaviors per academic block excludes the blanks. So in this case, we're just going to be looking at RB's performance as an average, but we're going to take out those blanks, those zeros, in the computation. So this tells us the intensity when it occurs rather than an average for the day, which includes the blanks, and we want to be able to assess the contribution of those blanks, and we can assess that by comparing these values with these values. 0.97 was the physical aggression overall with blanks, but when physical aggression to self did occur, the intensity was 1.77. So it gives us a good idea about how intense it was. Now what about down here where personal hygiene, she showed physical aggression to self of 3, a rating of 3. In other words, in order to get a 3, there can't be any other value, right? There couldn't be a 2 or a 1 collected. It would have to be only 3s, because if you get an average of 3, it has to be only of 3, because 3 is the maximum value. So you say, well, wait a minute. That means she was physically aggressive every time, because we're not looking at the blank. So it's every time that she was physically aggressive during personal hygiene, it was the maximum amount of physical aggression. And that graph says, yes, that's in fact true. But then you have to ask, well, how many times did that happen? How many times did she get a rating at all? Well, to answer that question, we can go back up. So here we are. It says here that when she did receive a rating, it was a rating of 3. How many times did she get a rating in personal hygiene? That'll tell us how valid that measure is. So we're going to scoot all the way up to the top, and what we find out is it only happened once. So you can see how we can answer a lot of different questions with these graphs by comparing and contrasting them, because you can't compress the data into one graph and have it represent all of the different kinds of issues involved. You can't have it answer all of your questions, because each graph has to compress the data in a certain number of ways. What we have is 4 of them, so that when you can compare them, you can pretty much get what you want. So let's see what we have here. Looking, we have, well, let's take engine room. Okay, she had physical aggression average of 2. Okay, still pretty high. It's medium amount. That's not desirable. How many times did she go into the engine room? Well, let's take a look up at the top again. She went into engine room 23 times. So that value of 2 as an average now has greater validity, because it wasn't just once that it occurred, it was actually 23 times. And functional academics occurred 37 times. What about for functional academics? What was her average there? It was also 2, slightly less. Instead of 2.04, it was just 2 even. And so that tells us that she's doing it a lot with an average of 2. So there's all sorts of different combinations of analyses that you can use the AB graphs for. It's a wonderful way to inform your FBA, your functional behavior assessment, because you're looking at each individual academic block and how the increasing and decreasing target behaviors are occurring. Okay, so let's put a bookmark in that. That was the AB graph. Once again, I'm Lewis Weber for Behavior Care. Thank you for your attention.